Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Parker from Smart Selling. I'd like to welcome you to our December webinar with Awareness Network, making sense of your social marketing content and building a social marketing content strategy. I'm pleased to welcome or introduce Mike Lewis from Awareness Network. Mike is the VP of Marketing and Sales, and we've known each other for quite a few years, so I'm very pleased to be working with Mike this afternoon on our webinar. Mike, I'd like to hand over to you if you could introduce yourself and just explain what we're going to go through over the next 1 hour.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It has been a while since we first met. I mean, we actually, just to give people on the line a little color, we actually started working together. And I want to say it was 7 years ago. We were selling it was a while. We were selling a software product called SalesNet. And Mark was our Australian partner, and I'm really psyched that we're able to work together again with a new product that I'm selling. So really psyched about it. So today, for everybody on the line, what we're going to talk about is kind of your social marketing content strategy, how to build it from the ground up. And this is a session I've given a bunch of different times. I think you're going to get a lot out of it. A couple of things I want to let you know about up front. First of all, ask as many questions as you'd like throughout the session. There's a couple of ways you can do it. First, you can use the Q&A button in the right-hand corner of the WebEx console. So feel free to just shoot any questions that you have in, and Mark or I will be sure to answer them. We'll be checking it out throughout the session and making sure that we get to as many of them as possible at the end. The other way you can do it is if you're on Twitter, you can feel free to send a tweet out and just include the hashtag #AwarenessInc. And that's all one word. Mark and I will be monitoring the stream throughout the session, and as questions come in, we'll be sure to get back to you as soon as we can. A couple things I should let you know is, if you can't tell by my accent already, I'm from Boston. I'm actually from the U.S., and I come from the northeast part of the United States, which is a good thing and a bad thing. The bad thing about it is we're notorious for talking really, really fast. So I tend to talk really fast, and I even talk faster when I get excited about the subject I'm talking about. And I get really excited when I talk about social media and social content in general. So that's one warning I'm going to give to everybody up front, that if I do tend to talk too fast, I'm going to ask Mark to jump in and just tell me to slow down, because I have a tendency to do that, especially as I start talking about things that I really enjoy, and this happens to be one of them. So in the next 30 minutes, and I say 30 very loosely, this could go 45 or so, but in the next 30 minutes to 45 minutes, we're going to talk about a few things. First, I'm going to talk to you about some challenges that enterprise marketers face, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we got there. We're going to talk about what some of the experts and organizations that are using content strategies and how they're doing it, some of the things that they've done. So we're going to give you some examples from both the expert side as well as content strategies in place at large organizations. And then just talk to you real quickly about a simple content management plan, something that when organizations talk to us about what it is that they need to do, this is the advice we give them. But before I jump into anything, let me give you a little sense about who I am. As I mentioned to you before, I'm a Boston native. I'm very proud to be a new father. That little guy on the right there with the Boston Red Sox cap on is my son, Frankie. He's the world's smallest Red Sox fan, and he's great. And the reason I put up a picture of him isn't just to show off that I'm a proud new dad, but also he ties into a story I'm going to tell you in a minute. So keep Frankie in the back of your mind. I'm a marketer. I'm an entrepreneur. But most importantly, I'm a marketing and sales guy. One of the issues that I have every once in a while is that people lump me in the bucket of social media guy. And at heart, I'm a marketing guy. I'd hate to spend time on this call boring everybody with the amount of radio and TV and print and direct mail ads that I've done. It's not just social media, but it's a big part of who I am, especially now, because I am an active blogger, tweeter, and overall social media enthusiast. And I also run sales and marketing here at Awareness. And if you're wondering what Awareness does, and the software we provide is called the Social Marketing Hub. And what it allows you to do is tie all your social channels together in one place. So you can publish content out. You can manage that content from one single location, so you aren't sharing passwords across your organization. Measure the effectiveness of that content, so you know that the blog post that you publish on Facebook and Twitter about a certain specific subject is getting more traction than maybe some other posts that you're putting out there. So you're actually able to see the effectiveness of your social media marketing in action. And then you're actually able to engage with the people that are talking with you about your content. So if someone posts a comment or They like your Facebook, post that you put up, or they retweet something that you put out there. The software captures that. We give you one centralized place where you log in and you can actually engage with that content from one place. I'm not sure how big Foursquare is down there, and I know Mark and I talked about it briefly that we're gonna cover some of the things that Foursquare does. But if you have time, you can check out a really cool new thing that we launched, which is called Foursquare Perspectives. It's a free tool that allows you to analyze different venues in whatever area of the world that you're in, or any specific venues that you want. So in this example, I quickly pulled up a search on Starbucks, and it gives me a quick report on how many total venues there are in the world, how many mayors there are at specific locations, how many check-ins there have been at specific locations, who are the top 10 mayors, believe it or not. There's a gentleman in New York City that's the mayor of 5 different Starbucks. I know that sounds crazy, but he is. He must just be fueled up on coffee all the time, running from one to the other, but it's true. You can check it out. It's awarenessnetworks.perspectives.com, and from there you can just link to the Foursquare and type right in. So check it out. It's free. Like I said, it gives you a sense of what's going on in the world of Foursquare today. So before I jump into my session, one of the things that I think is really important, and one of the points that you're going to get from me, is content management. When I first came into the business, was about content that a brand published out to either drive traffic or promote what it is that they're doing. It was very one way. Well, that's changed a lot. Content management now just isn't about managing the content that you publish. It's also managing the content that other people publish. And that's one of the themes you're going to hear me talking about through this, and how organizations are adapting to it. But before I get into everything, I want to share a personal story with you. I travel a lot for work, and I tend to be on the road quite a bit, actually. And for some reason, I always end up flying Delta Airlines. Now, up front, let me tell you, this is not because I'm brand loyal to Delta. This has nothing to do, this is not a sales pitch for Delta Airlines, but for some reason, whenever I fly, it happens to be on Delta. Just happens to be that that's the place where the planes are going, and I need to go. This is tough for me, because I end up leaving Frankie home. And I said I was going to tie into the story a little later. This is it. So it's hard because I always end up leaving Frankie at home, and it's tough seeing my little guy, leave when I'm out there, when I leave and see him out there. In fact, my wife likes to remind me that I'm never home, so every once in a while she'll put me on the phone while I'm traveling. It always makes me want to go home, but it's really tough to leave him behind. Recently, and this was actually just last December, actually almost about a year ago, I was in January of last year, actually. I was on a Delta flight that went to Tampa to speak at a conference. The name of the conference was called Social Fresh. And again, I'm not pitching Social Fresh as a conference, but if you're over in the States and happen to be around for one, they're really good. It's a great place for brands to get together and talk about their social media strategies and the different things that they're doing. Really cool conference. And anyway, I went down to Tampa, did my session, did my whole thing in front of people, actually stuck around for a little bit after, networked for quite a bit, and then I got on the road and headed back to Tampa International Airport to fly back home. As I was driving, about halfway there, I realized something. All of a sudden dawned on me that I was actually heading to the airport on the wrong day. Now, you may laugh at that. You may say, well, that's crazy. Most people don't do that. But when you travel a lot of times travel plans get changed and you forget which day is which, and I just happened to be going back on the wrong day. So I did what anybody would do. And I called Delta. I got a very nice gentleman on the phone, and I explained my situation to him. And he said, look, I can make the change. I can get you on tonight's flight, but you're going to have to stick with me for about a half hour. The computers are getting overloaded this evening, and unfortunately, I'm going to have to do everything manually. So I said, that's absolutely fine. Do what you got to do. Spent about a half hour on the phone with him. We started chit-chatting a little bit, and at the end, he actually got me my reservation. I was able to check into a Delta kiosk and get on the plane. Now, just before the plane doors were closing, I sent out a tweet. And it was just that I was really happy with everything that Delta had done. And I wrote, on a Delta flight leaving Tampa, can't wait to get home. A side note, Delta customer service rocks. Said it before, and I continue to be impressed. Now, I sent that out. The doors of the plane closed. I went home, flew all the way back up to Boston, and I was able to see Frankie, and I was happy. And I went to bed that night, and I was really excited. Now, the next day, I hadn't even thought about the tweet until I actually got to the office. When I came in the morning, and I saw a very nice post from Delta Blog that said, Boston Mike, thanks for your comment. We hope you had a great trip home to that new baby. And the first thing that went through my head was, this is great. Wow, it's really nice. They connected with me one-on-one. What I've always wanted an airline to do. They connected with me as an individual. Really cool stuff. Then I started to think about it a little more. And I thought, well, wait a minute. To that new baby, how the heck do they know that I have a new baby at home? And then I started to think about it a little more, and I realized that it absolutely had to be that guy. There's no two ways about it. It was definitely this guy that did something to me on the phone. And that was a customer wow moment for me. So I started to think, and because I sell software and social media, because I'm really involved in it, started to think, how could this happen? And so let me just walk through what I thought happened in my head real quick. So I thought I had this conversation with this really nice gentleman who rebooked my flight. While I was talking to him, he pulled up his CRM system, which I just assumed was Salesforce.com. That went through my head. And as I was there, he typed in something like, just spoke with Mike, wants to head home to see his son, so I booked him on an earlier flight. He did ask me while I was on the line. He said, why you want to get home? And I said, well, I'm going to get a little kid at home, so I just assumed he put that in his notes, and it got saved. And when that happened, when I sent out my tweet, something happened. There were alerts that got sent out throughout Delta across the world. I'm pretty sure at this point the CEO of Delta was even notified that some guy was tweeting about the company. And, of course, when that happened, the notification went out, and they sent a very nice tweet back. Well, that's not exactly what happened. In fact, I was so geeky about it, I went on and I actually researched the people who handle social media at Delta, got in touch with a very nice woman named Rachel who told me that actually what I thought had happened couldn't have been farther from the truth. In fact, at that time, in January, the day I was flying back, there was a series of really bad snowstorms in the Northeast area. So it was really difficult for people to get back. There were people stranded all over the country. And what she said to me was, hey, I got really nasty tweets all day. You were the only nice one that came in. And typically at this point in the presentation, I used to show the stream of tweets that came in until some people got offended by some of the language that was being used by people to describe Delta. She said, you were the only one that was nice to me. So I went in and looked up your Twitter profile. I noticed that you had a link to your Facebook profile, which I went to and saw that you had all these pictures of a really young kid there. And as it turns out, I have a young girl, she said, that's about 2 years old and looked about the same age as your son, so I figured you must be getting home to see him. So, not quite as exciting, but a great story nonetheless. And it's all about the content that I publish and the brand reacting to it. The brand listening to what was going on out there, taking the time to hear what was happening, and reacting to that content. And if you think about it, it's a lot different than the way it used to be. I mean, it used to be where, even for travel or buying things, major appliances, you actually go to a store, and you'd meet someone one-on-one, and you'd shake hands with them. And we're in a completely different age now. We're in the age of you. We're in the age that Time Magazine, for the first time in an unprecedented Person of the Year, they named you. And when I say you, I mean not just me, but you being everybody on the line, everybody that's out there actively publishing on the Internet as the Person of the Year. This is completely unprecedented. We actually, for the first time, have more control in brands. And this is a huge issue for every major and small and mid-sized organization in the world, because they're dealing with how do we manage not only the content that we're putting out, but what about the content people are saying about us? How do we talk to that? How do we respond to it? How do we react to what's happening out there? The way we communicate has completely evolved. I'm going to make a big, bold statement here that social media represents the largest communication shift in history. And I don't say that lightly, but it is the largest communication shift in history. And I'll tell you what I mean in a little bit, but business and marketers are still trying to figure that out. If you think about the evolution, if you think about how people are typically used to publishing, I want to give you an example of a gentleman by the name of Matt. And if you go to YouTube right now, if you have some time, and you Google a video called "Where the Heck is Matt?" And basically what it is the story of a kid who decided that he was on a trip with his friends, and his friends said, go to that video and go to that app typically I'm engaged with. While you go to our website and you see kind of the big brands out there, the Sonys and Kodaks and McDonald's and different companies that I spend a lot of time with and help them figure out their social media strategy, through our software. We also do a lot of work with small to mid-sized companies. And one of the interesting parts of these challenges that I think you'll see is that they actually translate well down to the organizations, to some of the smaller and mid-sized organizations out there that are wrestling with social media themselves. The first is an inability to scale. Jeremiah Ouyang, who's a good friend of mine, he's a research analyst. He's at a company called Altimeter Group. I was just out visiting him a couple of weeks ago, and one of the points he brought up, he said, organizations are struggling with social media, specifically in social content management, because the only way to scale it is to add more bodies to it. It's really difficult for organizations to take what it is that they're doing and actually scale it on a mass level. Let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I was at a company in the northwest part of the U.S. They're a really big retailer, and I was talking to them about their strategy. I said, well, tell me a little bit about what it is that you do. And they said, well, in terms of social media, we have a Facebook page, and on that Facebook page, we have 4 Facebook pages, and on that we have a combined, about 300,000 fans, and that has since grown. And so we have a Twitter account that's really active. We have a YouTube channel is really active. We have 3 Twitter accounts that are designed for different aspects of the company, one for sales, one for marketing, and one for customer service. It's really, really active, and we have this MySpace page with about 15,000 fans. And the thing that they kept describing over and over again as we went from channel to channel was that our fans are passionate. They love our brand. They're very passionate about what it is that we do. And so I kind of stopped and said, all right, well, what's the problem? What is it that you guys are looking to resolve? And they said, well, it's a scale issue for us. In fact, we're actually shutting down our MySpace page because we just don't have the bandwidth to focus on it. We're so involved in doing stuff on Facebook and Flickr and YouTube and Twitter that we just don't have time to manage our MySpace account. And for them, that issue of scale isn't just about adding more bodies to it. It's about focusing on the channels that they have traction in, figuring out the best way to engage with the consumers that have selected to engage with them. And because of that, they've decided to drop, in their words, this is coming from them, not me, 15,000 of their closest friends from being able to interact with them. Now, there might be some duplication on other channels, but I think you get the point that scaling this is really difficult because each platform is different. Engaging with each platform is different. Anybody that says social media is free when you're using any one of these platforms doesn't know what they're talking about because at the very least it requires manpower to automate what's going on, to drive what's going on, to engage with the conversations of what's going on there. A great example came out of the U.S. You may have heard of this, and it's since been debunked, but I'm going to give you the example anyway. In Europe, Ben & Jerry's announced that they're not going to promote themselves through email anymore. They're going to send out a couple emails a year, and they're exclusively going to go through Facebook to promote and connect with their fans because that's what their fans decided to do. Now, even though that was debunked, it's not a real thing. You can see the flip side of it. More and more organizations are starting to do this, where they're cutting down on on things that we consider standard parts of the marketing process, like email, and saying we're just going to go exclusively to Facebook, or we're going to dedicate more resources to Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or whatever it is, whatever channel it is that people have selected to interact with. More and more brands are starting to do that, and you're going to see more and more of that, over the course of this year. Second big thing that organizations are struggling with is security and control. And I'm going to give you an example of it from an organization that I work with. Let's assume that you're part of an organization that has 3 different business units that are focused on social media, that have some aspect of social media, customer service, marketing, and PR. And let's take it a step further. Let's say that this organization is actually global in basis. You have locations all over the world. So this customer service, this marketing, the sales team are dispersed all over the world. There's offices in every, on every continent and in every major city. And you ask them a very simple question. You say, so how is it that you share passwords with these other people in your organization to access your Facebook page, your Twitter account? And how do you give agencies access? And they say, well, it's really simple. We have an Excel spreadsheet that we send around from office to office. Now, I'm going to give you a true story. I was at a security software company here in the States, and just by definition, 50% of the people on the line right now are using this particular security software to protect your computer against viruses and malware and that kind of stuff. 50% of the people on the call are using that. So you can do the math and figure out who it is. And I was in a room with their marketing team as well as their IT staff, and I said, I asked that question. I said, well, how do you manage passwords with the agencies that you're working with to promote the product from your pages? And this very nice woman raised her hand and said, so it's really simple. We have an Excel spreadsheet. We send it around. Someone leaves the company. We just update it and send it around again. I thought the IT guy was going to jump out of the chair. His face turned brick red. He said, well, you have to read our internal security policies because clearly you don't know what's going on. We need to stop this from happening. You cannot send an unencrypted Excel spreadsheet around from person to person sharing passwords. It's a huge challenge, and it's even a big challenge to small to mid-sized companies because you can imagine there's a lot of churn. People are moving from place to place. There's a lot of interaction with these channels, and if there's not a centralized way to log in, it becomes really difficult to make sure that everything that you're doing is secure. And we're hearing more and more about corporate sites and social channels getting hacked and having stuff that's promoted on it that isn't becoming so. And I'm actually going to take a step back and talk to you about another security and control concern. Let's say you have these same 3 departments. They're distributed all over the world, all over wherever. And all of a sudden, they all start publishing different messages in different tones and giving different responses to things that are going on. Because there's such a lack of control over what's happening on social media. And again, this is just internal. This has nothing to do with the external-facing people that are publishing content that may be against your brand or may have bad things to say about you as a company. This is just talking about people internally at your organization saying things that are contradictory to what other people might be saying. It happens an awful lot. Now, a great example of a company that's doing that really well, and if you have a chance to check them out, is folks at 12th Force at Best Buy. It's a team of a ton of people that are all engaging on Twitter. And if you go to the 12th Force page on Twitter, one of the things that you walk away noticing is that even though it appears as though every tweet from 12th Force is coming from one person, when in fact it's coming from a whole host of people all over the country. They use a single tone, they use a single way of responding. Everybody's on the same page. It actually blows your mind to think that there are hundreds of people behind the scenes tweeting, and it seems like it's only coming from one person. Really cool example. 12th Force at Best Buy, if you haven't seen them yet. There's a complete lack of buy-in and resource, and I don't think this is any surprise for most companies. But it's challenging for the practitioners. The people that are actually practicing social media becomes a real challenge because the landscape is really difficult to navigate. Without a lack of buy-in and resources from the upper execs, it's really difficult to test additional channels to make sure what you're doing is good and to make sure that you have buy-in kind of across the board. I was at a company, sorry about that. I was at a company recently, a really large retailer here in the States again, and I met with their entire social media team. And this is a multi-billion-dollar organization. I'm not sure if they're down under yet, but they're a multi-billion-dollar organization here in the U.S. They're great stock. They always overperform. And I met with their social media team that consisted of 2 people. And during the entire meeting, the woman that I was meeting with had her iPhone out and she was responding to tweets as I was there, to the point where I actually got kind of frustrated and I said, look, if this isn't a good time, I'm happy to come back tomorrow or I can come back next week or whatever it is when you have more time. And she apologized. She said, look, it has nothing to do with you and I love what it is that you're talking about. They are a customer of ours now. And she said, it has nothing to do with that. The problem is I'm the only person doing this. Social media is a small percentage of my real quote-unquote job, and I need to do it all the time. We've won awards on this, and the executive position is, well, why do you need more resources? It seems like you're doing a great job at it right now. We need to prove out the value of this more. So a lot of frustration, a lot of lack of buy-in and resources from a lot of folks out there. Another big challenge, I'm not going to pull up any example slides on this, but just talk to it. Excuse me. Reporting is ad hoc. One of the things that I realized as I got into the space, and one of the things I thought was going to happen as I got into the space and started working with customers, is they were going to tell me that there wasn't enough data. I thought they were going to say, look, there's not enough data here. We need to find more. We need to figure out what the value is. I couldn't have been more wrong, and it couldn't be more the opposite. Right now, marketers are struggling because they have so much access to data, more than we've ever had in the history of marketing. We have more access to data, and we're trying to figure out what to do with it. That we're getting information from our CRM system, our marketing automation system, every social media channel that we participate in. If you're using a monitoring application, you're getting it from that. You're getting data from everywhere, and you basically have to download all this stuff, put it into Excel spreadsheets, and figure out the right way to do it. I can tell you, organizations that I walk into, it's funny, I'll ask them the question, how do you figure out social media ROI? How do you figure out the right way to calculate the value you're getting out of social media? And you walk into one company, and they'll put this sophisticated algorithm on a whiteboard, and you go, man, these guys have cracked the code. That's genius. You walk into another company the very next day, you ask the same question, and you get a completely different algorithm, and it makes just as much sense as the one you saw the day before. The point is, we haven't cracked the code on this yet. Anybody that tells you they have is wrong, because everybody has a different reason for getting into social media and publishing content and the stuff that they do. They have different goals, so the objectives are different, and when you have different objectives, at the end of the day, there can't be a singular way of saying this is what makes social media work and this is what makes it doesn't. It's a really difficult thing. If anybody does crack the code and you happen to be on the line and you think you have an idea of what the right calculation is, give me a call and we'll start a company because I guarantee you'll make billions of dollars off doing it. So reporting is still completely ad hoc. And finally, centralization is key. Jumped ahead there. Centralization is really important. What's happened to a lot of companies, this includes small companies, by the way, is there hasn't been a formal policy put in place. There hasn't been a formal content plan put in place that says this is how we're going to do things going forward. Departments have been forced almost to act independently as rogue agents, very entrepreneurial, which is a good thing, but it's a bad side. Organizations have lost a lot of control. Well, we're starting to see a trend now in the U.S., and I imagine if you haven't seen it yet in Australia, you're going to start to see it soon. What you're going to see is organizations starting to take the reins in and say we're going to centralize this social media function. What we're seeing at a lot of big brands is they're starting to create tiger teams of people that represent different departments who have some kind of stake in the company's overall social media strategy, who get together, who plan out what the policies are, plan out what the procedures are, and put some rules in place. Companies like HP and Coke, organizations like that have led the way. and are actually starting to pass their learnings down to smaller organizations of how policies need to be put together, how you need to make sure that people are all on the same page with what's going out there. So a lot more centralization, and organizations are struggling with how to centralize. So it's not so much that they have the need. I think everybody agrees that there is a need to centralize social media in some department or function. The challenge is how do we do it, and which function controls it, and who's actually the owner of what's going on with social media. Now the good thing is, and the plus side of everything, is all these challenges, everything that organizations are going through, are opportunities in disguise. Especially when you think about how brands are publishing. So I want to give you a couple of quick examples of how some folks here in the United States are using social media, not just in the U.S., but kind of around the world, how they're using social media to become part of their strategy. And a great example is what Ford's doing, Ford's Content Factory. And this is a Boston guy by the name of Scott Monty, who worked at an agency and then became the chief, I forget what his exact title is, but it's like the chief social content officer at Ford. And basically what's really cool about what Scott's done is he's used social media channels in an innovative way every single time. He publishes a ton of content. Pull up any Ford press release, barring the earnings releases they put out, and you'll see that there's multiple types of assets associated with each one. Video, really cool content, great pictures, that kind of stuff. Because Scott's philosophy is demonstration almost often beats description. So actually showing you how something works makes it that much more makes it that much more believable and that much more saleable as you start to publish stuff on social media. A great example is some of the stuff they recently did using the Facebook like button, and I'll show you another example of that in a minute, for the launch of brand new, I can't even think of the name of the car, sorry, the Ford Explorer. They actually embedded multiple like buttons. So you can go onto your Facebook page, you can say, I like the Ford Explorer, but I like it because it's comes in green and it's a safe car to drive, or because it goes really fast, or whatever the reasons are. And they calculated this and had some context around it. But a really cool use of the like button and a really cool use of promoting social content. Now if you want to see a great example of a company that's done some really cool stuff using the like button, go to the Friend store on Levi's and log in using your Facebook account. What you'll see is what happens is the page changes dynamically based on who your friends are and what they've liked. So I just did a quick snapshot of some of the stuff here. You can see that what it does is pull back in, it looks at all my friends on Facebook, and tells me, it serves up content based on what my friends have already gone in and liked. So it tells me that my friends like the original rugged jeans from Levi, about, what's the number, 2,000 of my friends have liked that. It actually tells me people that have recently liked stuff, so it tells me that Jeremiah, really likes this pair of jeans. Gives me an opportunity to buy them, puts on the Facebook page. Now think about content management, think about your content strategy here. This is dynamic content that's created on the fly based on what your friends are telling you to do. Now the reason Levi's, based on what your friends are liking, the reason Levi's did this, and I apologize by the way that I'm coughing so much, I'm just getting over a cold, so just give you a heads up there. So I'm just having some trouble as I start to talk for a while, but what's interesting about this is Levi's realized something that we've all known as marketers from day one, is that your friends provide the best referrals for you, right? That if my friend, if Mark tells me that he just bought something, I'm much more likely to buy it if I'm in the market for that thing. I'm much more to buy that specific brand because Mark told me that he liked it and he bought it and he's getting a lot of value out of it. Levi's is taking this exact same example. They're embedding it in their page and they're using it to their advantage. And just so you know, this is not an incredibly difficult task. What you're looking at, even though Levi's is big, you might say, well, they're a big company, they got millions and billions of dollars, whatever it is. This is actually a relatively simple task because all it is plugging into Facebook's APIs and pulling back specific pieces of content based on what people are saying. And those APIs are all exposed. So it's actually very easy for you to do. If you have a savvy web developer or someone on staff that can do it for you, really, really simple to do. And a really cool example, again, of using dynamic content that's been through social. Now I know I'm not sure. I know we're going to talk about, Mark's going to have some questions about Foursquare in a minute. This is a really cool example for me. Now, in the U.S., I know no one on the phone for the most part has heard of this example, but it's really cool. It's in the United States, we have and you might have it down in Australia too, I'm not 100% sure, but it's a channel called History. Basically what it does is just, talk about different historical events and have documentaries and that kind of stuff. Well, History Channel decided that they were going to use Foursquare in a very unique way. Now, Foursquare is a location-based service. So as you get to a physical location with Foursquare, you pull out your phone or your mobile device, and you can actually check into the place. Now, the reason that's cool, what it does is look at your location, tell you the places that are around, you select where you are, you check into the place. The reason that's cool is, number one, you can see where your friends are, and, if there are any friends there. So imagine you're at a bar one night, really crowded, concert, maybe, whatever it is. You check in and you can say, oh, hey, geez, I didn't realize Mark was here tonight. I'll send him a text to see if we can connect while we're in the same place. So it's cool for that reason. The other thing that's cool about Foursquare is they actually serve up something called tips. So if I get to a restaurant, for example, and this actually happened to me this weekend, so I got to a restaurant that I had never been to before, checked into it, and immediately a tip popped up that said, your friend Steve Tremblay has been to this restaurant before. He recommends that you try this specific dish off the menu, and here's why, and it gives me a little write-up that Steve put in there. What history did, if you think about history, they're a TV channel. So the stuff that they do doesn't really have physical locations. I mean, they have an office in New York City, but it's not something that people are really going to check in and they're not going to be able to use for remote programming. What history did was they went to historically significant locations around the United States, and they put tips in. And the tips were to promote a TV series today coming up called America, the Story of Us. Really cool thing if you're a fan of American history. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, by the way, and that's just a side note. But as you check into these places, for example, you check into the Statue of Liberty. It says the Statue of Liberty was a gift from the French in whatever year the Statue of Liberty was a gift from the French. And it says, be sure to climb to the top and get a great view on as part of the torch. And by the way, check out America, the Story of Us, debuting this Sunday on History Channel. That was it. It was very simple, very innocuous, very soft sell, and based on content and fact. Well, what's interesting was that because of this, if you talk to some of the folks out there, one of the reasons they think they got so much viral buzz from it was because of that Foursquare program. In fact, they believe it helped the America, the Story of Us become the most watched and highest rated program in History Channel's history. So again, another unique way of looking at content that's being published and publishing just in a different way that had really never been done before. So a really cool example of someone using that. So what's next? So how do you publish content? Well, I give the folks that I work with a very simple plan to figure out the right way to publish content. The first is do content on it. This is really critical. A lot of organizations fail this step. What content do we have? What content can we repurpose? What content do we have in place? What's our inventory look like? Where do we have gaps? So it's really simple to just see what you have, figure out where you need to be, and just do a gap analysis. We need to get more. If it's white papers, we need more white papers on this. We need more training materials. We need more video content to promote on Facebook. Whatever it is, very simple, take a content audit, put it all in one place. Second thing is develop a content plan. So actually map out an editorial calendar that tells you when you're going to publish different things and through what channels. In our marketing war room here at Awareness, I have a complete wall that has our next 2 quarters mapped out. The high level tells me the theme, so the stuff that we're going to be promoting. Tells me the specific pieces of content, if we're contracting anybody to help write or produce that content, who they are, then what channels we're going to promote it through. So it's a huge physical editorial calendar that is hanging on a wall, but we also have it in multiple editorial calendars as well, including the editorial calendar we have inside the Social Marketing Hub, our software. Makes it real easy for us to figure out what we're doing next and when things are coming, and any other holes that we need. Finally, don't be afraid to build the content. That's the big thing that people always say to me when we're putting content together is that I just don't have the resources to pull together. Don't be afraid to outsource the content and find the right people to do it. So find experts, find customers, find organizations that are willing to write stuff. I can tell you that if the economy in Australia is anything like the economy in the U.S., there are a lot of out-of-work writers right now. It's very easy for us to contract people to put really great content pieces together at very, very, very short dollars, really valuable stuff. And that goes for everything, video, blogs, any ebooks that we're going to have written. Again, more B2B focused, in how we're doing stuff, but excellent way of generating more content. And finally, the last step is deploy, test, and grow. One of the problems that a lot of companies run into is they put out all this great content and they don't measure the success or failure of it, and it's not targeted at different audiences. So what I always recommend is deploy, get it out there, get feedback on it, test it, see how things are going, and then modify what it is. There's a great book that just got released last week. It's called Content Rules, and it's by the Chief Content Officer of Marketing Crops. Her name's Ann Hanley. She's, again, a Boston native up here, and a good friend of mine, C.C. Chapman, who's just a content maven. This guy just publishes content constantly. It's an unbelievable book. I can't recommend getting it enough. Check it out on Amazon.com. But it's a great way. What they promote really in the book, and one of the most important parts of the book, in my opinion, is that they promote two types of content. They promote taking really big, long, involved pieces and chopping it down into little bits that you can use any different way. Maybe you have a long, white paper that you chop up into sections that you use as blog posts or shorter e-books or that kind of thing. Or take a webinar, for example. This webinar I could chop up into 3 or 4 different sections and use it as different promotions on my website or on YouTube or whatever it may be. But they also say, the flip side of that is don't be afraid to start small. Start with a blog post that grows into something broader, that grows into something else. But don't be afraid to deploy, to test it, and then grow with the content that you put out there. I think that's one of the most important things that a lot of organizations trip up on is they either go for the perfect thing right out of the gate, and it takes them a long time to get stuff up, or they don't take the time to manage and test and see what's happening. So those are kind of the 4 steps. And Mark, I know I went through this kind of quickly, but I wanted to make sure we had enough time to save for questions. So I'm going to stop there and start to take some questions from you and the crowd, because I know we've got a couple while we were going on here. I saw a couple come in through WebEx. So actually, I just see one from you, Mark, right through Twitter here. It says, when we do the content audit, should we try and determine what channel will fit to it? Well, that's a great question. I think there are 2 things. One is, yes, you should try to determine the right channel, because you might have to tweak the content that you're putting out there for that channel. So, for example, the way, and I'm just going to use awareness as an example, the way we engage with our Facebook fans is very different than the way we engage with our Twitter fans. So especially for social media, it's important to look at the content you have, figure out the channels that you're going to, and then try to adapt it for that channel. The flip side of that is, you don't want to develop, we always want to develop it for specific personas. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time on here at Awareness is figuring out who, and I've done this at every company I've been at, who are the people inside an organization that we're really trying to go after? And then figure out what channels that those people live on, right? So, for example, if my persona is, Mark, I'll use a salesman example. If I'm looking at the sales operations person at a company, first I want to figure out what the challenges are for that persona. What's the things that they bump into every day? How does our software specifically help them meet those needs? And then I develop content for, specifically for that persona. What is it that they're trying to do? Then I back into it, I take another step back and I say, where are these guys living? And where am I going to make this content the most relevant? And in most cases, you find out that people are living in multiple areas, that they spend some time on Facebook, they spend some time on YouTube, they spend some time on Twitter, whatever it is, then backing that content into those specific channels. So it's actually probably a longer answer than you were looking for, but I think it's actually a big question, because as you do that, it's really important to, number one, identify who it is that you're targeting your content to, and then what channels do those people live on, and modifying that content based on the channel.
So quick question for you. To give you a voice break, how much content is enough? Is there a measure by channel, or is it really just experiment and see what comes out?
Oh, man, that's a great question. And it's not just so much how much content out there by channel. It's how often do you want to hit people on specific channels, right? I mean, do you want to overwhelm your Facebook fans getting stuff and, every day or whatever it is? And it depends on the company that you're talking to. I know that I've heard everything from, we only send out content to our fans on these channels, once a week, to we touch them with folks, multiple times a day. And it really depends on the company. I mean, a lot of the brands that we work with, and I'll give you an example. One is Sony Pictures. And every Blu-ray DVD that comes out, they create a Facebook fan page for, and they promote a lot of content through it. I think the difference with them is they have fans that are just rapidly engaged. They came out with a movie called Dear John. Did Dear John come out in Australia? Do you know, Mark?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Sorry, so they now have over 3 million fans just for this one movie. It's not a great movie. I'm not gonna lie. I wasn't a fan of it. No, I'm just kidding. It was an okay movie. It was kind of a romantic kind of thing, but it kind of a feel good kind of movie. Actually, it was kind of sad. But anyway, long story short, 3 million fans. The challenge they have isn't so much publishing content out, it's the fact that the fans are so passionate about what it is that they're talking about. So people come on and they leave comments, and for Sony, it's up to them to make sure that they engage appropriately with the content that's coming in. So for them, it's not so much about publishing content, it's about interacting with the people that are putting content out there. So there's no magic number. I wish I could tell you that, it's 2 posts a day on Facebook, 1 tweet a day on Twitter, and 1 blog post every other day, through whatever blogging platform you're using. It's just not that simple. You really got to test it and see what your fans are looking for. It's the same thing with the content. What types of content do they want to see? Are they looking to download, how-to guides? Are they looking to download best practice materials? Are they looking to check out videos? What is it? And then you can start to backtrack into that.
If we follow on from that, are you seeing this idea, you talked about centralization, is that allowing better return on investment? Is it allowing better visibility, or can they calculate return on investment better when they're centralized?
They definitely can start to calculate it better, and like I said, I don't think there's no magic bullet right now. Well, see, one of the problems, Mark, is that when you're talking about centralization and big or small company, the first question I always ask, when it gets to the ROI question, is what is it that you're trying to do? And some companies will say we're trying to increase sales. Other companies will say we're trying to reduce customer service costs. Other companies will say we're trying to increase awareness. Ford's a great example. If you ask them how you calculate ROI, it's about how much awareness are we getting? Have we changed our brand image in the marketplace? Other companies are saying we're trying to drive direct sales activity from what we're doing on social media. A great example of that is Dell Outlet. So Dell Outlet, that's a Twitter account that's dedicated to driving sales. That's it. They're not solving customer service issues, whatever it is. So when you talk about centralization, one of the challenges that any organization that's doing that is trying to quantify is all those different things, right? So just by definition, centralizing is saying, how is social media helping us reduce our customer service costs? How is social media helping increase our sales? How is it helping increase our awareness? That's the challenge that they're getting to, because remember, they're people from different departments. So, and this isn't a knock on those people, but they all aren't thinking the same about how they're working inside the company, right? ROI for customer service rep is very different than ROI for someone who's focused on marketing or sales. It's very different for someone who's trying to increase or improve brand awareness. So it's a different question. But yes, I think that the short answer to it is yes. If you're centralizing what it is that you're doing, at least you have all the data in one place so you can start to figure out what's working and what's not working, which can help you lead to an ROI.
So, when I talk to companies here in Australia, I just want to thread a bit of difference between our market and your market, Mike.
Yep.
There is a perception here that Facebook is still primarily a consumer, personal-driven social network. Mm-hmm. Are you seeing any evidence in the US that B2B brands are getting engagement, getting value from Facebook?
Well, that's a very common misconception, actually. I think the thing to remember is that the people on Facebook it doesn't matter where they work, there's still people on Facebook. And it's hard to calculate, or Facebook or any social outlet, because you've heard that from each and every one, right? That people on Twitter are only, consumers, and people on Facebook are only consumers. And the fact of the matter is that if you're B2B, there's still a person behind the scenes that's doing stuff. There's still a person behind the scenes making decisions, and they are investigating what's going on out there and brands through those social networks. And if they're not doing it directly, they're hearing what their friends are saying on social networks about your brand, about your company, especially when they're in the mode of making a buying decision about something, whatever it is, something for the office. So we're definitely seeing, in the U.S. anyway, and I don't know what's happening in Australia, but we're definitely seeing more and more B2B type companies focused on their social presence. I'll give you a great example. Last week, one of our clients is one of our newer clients is CA Technologies, Computer Associates. They're a very B2B focused company, and they are spending a huge amount of time and resources in what they're doing in social media. Now, that's a big brand. They're one of the largest software companies in the world. But the fact of the matter is that they've realized that it's not just about the consumer. It's not just consumers that are there. Yeah, when I'm on Facebook, I'm both a consumer because I'm looking at some consumer stuff and I'm listening to what my friends are saying about consumer products, but I'm also Mike the business guy who's making buying decisions for awareness and out there looking for products and awareness. And that's a fact for any company that you're talking to that's out there. So organizations that don't believe that their customers are out there are just fooling themselves. And it's just a matter of time before more and more start to wake up. We're starting to see it now. I mean, in the U.S., I can tell you that mid and smaller B2B companies are starting to realize that social media represents a huge opportunity for them to connect with customers in ways they've never had before. And we're seeing a ton of adoption around in that area.
So how quickly would you recommend a company start to allocate budget? I mean, we talk about getting experiments. How quickly are you seeing companies start to say, look, 20% or 30% is now allocated to here?
I think it depends on the company. I think it depends. I think there definitely needs, if they haven't done testing yet, if you haven't actually gone out and started to do stuff on any social channels, you have to start there, and you still have to see whether or not it's and how the right way to engage is before you actually start dedicating investment to it. So if you're a practitioner at any size company, I don't care what size it is, whether big or small, and you're going to make this investment, you're going to focus on social media going forward, you have to figure out what the value is. And if for no other reason than the fact that your superiors, the executive of the company, is going to say, all right, well, you want budget for this, tell me why I should allocate 10 or 20 or 30 or 50% of your budget to the social media thing when you haven't proved whether or not it's going to help you drive whatever it is you're trying to drive inside an organization. So finding the value is pretty key. It's actually a lot easier if you're trying to find sales and if you're trying to define sales or customer service or whatever it is, then I think people think. But that's the first place to start, number one. And in terms of how much they should allocate in the beginning, it's kind of a company-to-company kind of thing, but at a very minimum, I don't know if it's a budget line item that definitely needs to be allocated or if it's a resource line item. That what we've seen a trend in the U.S., or we saw a trend, I should say, last year and the year before, was that you had people that were hired for whatever it was. They were marketing, or they were PR, or they were customer service, and all of a sudden a percentage of their job was allocated to social media. Now, that's kind of a soft cost. You're not actually saying we're going to take 10% of the company's budget and put it towards social media, but you're taking an individual at a company and saying we're going to dedicate 10, 20% of your job, of your time, to focusing on social media. And we've seen that grow. Jeremiah actually put out a report. If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. It's up on SlideShare. It's the career path of the corporate social strategist is what it's called. And you can check, like I said, anybody on the line, go to SlideShare, type in Jeremiah Ouyang or career path of the corporate social media strategist, and you'll see that that's a trend that's happened in organizations, at least in the U.S. and the ones we looked at some of the larger ones.
Into that here too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And what's that happening to people,
We had a question on Twitter that I thought you might address for us.
Sure.
About syndicating content. Hopefully you can see it there. I'll just warn you up front, Mike. 26 Digital's a Kiwi, so you'll need to talk slowly.
Okay, I'll try to talk as slowly as I can. So what are my thoughts on the best ways to syndicate content both in and out of your website? And the reason I'm hesitating on this, Mark, is because it's kind of a loaded question for me. So let me give you kind of the philosophy behind it, and then I'll tell you why I'm biased towards it. So for me, it's critical. It's important. I've seen the most traction out of anything that I put out, any content that I put out, by syndicating it. And it's the basic premise of when people started talking about 10, 20 years ago about the values of integrated marketing, right? Where people said, you can't just send out a direct mail piece, you have to do direct mail and follow up with telemarketing. And you can't just do direct mail and telemarketing, you get the same list and have email and promote banner ads on the same site and newsletters. That same concept of integrated marketing still applies to social media, but for some reason people let it get away. So if you have a piece of content, it's important not just to promote it on your website, but it's important to take that same piece of content and either splice it up and like I said, publish it on different channels. It's really integrated social media marketing and making sure that you put it out across multiple channels so people have multiple ways to touch it, because everybody engages with social media differently. If you ask everybody, in my office, in my company, we're a social media-centric company. We sell social media software. It's what we do. But if you went to every single person in this company individually and you said, well, how do you engage with social media? What are the channels you use? I'd tell you that primarily I use Twitter. I mean, that's the way, I communicate with most of my friends. That's the way I syndicate it to my Facebook page. I'm not in Facebook very much. It's just a personal thing for me. It's just kind of how I do it. Spend some time on YouTube, whatever. But I guarantee each person, probably each person on this line right now, but it would have a different way that they interact with social media. And
sorry to cut off. If we go back to your point before about content audit and knowing the types of segments that you want to communicate with, let's say, for example, if you're an organisation that needs to communicate to essentially a professional company, but maybe the end user or you have a portion of your audience are consumers, I guess you need to factor that into how you syndicate so that you deliver a consumer message as well as a message to the corporate business who might be your customers.
Oh, absolutely, and that's really important. And actually, just one last follow-up to the last answer I just gave to our Kiwi friend out there, T6 Digital, is just so you guys know that that's what our software, the Social Marketing Hub, that's what I sell. I sell a multi-channel content publishing system that allows you to syndicate content and customize the content across multiple channels. So you log into our interface and you type in your blog post, you put in how it looks on Facebook, on Twitter, you hit the send button, and bang, that piece of content gets published out across multiple channels at once. So I just want to make 100% clear that is my bias, although it's also a bias that I happen to believe in as a professional. This content syndication is really important. But, Mark, to your point, it ties into that as well. I think that understanding who your market is, who those personas are, and making sure that, number one, you're hitting the right channel and you're dividing that content up the right way and hitting the people. Hitting is not the right word. That you're serving up content to people in the right format, in the right location is really, really critical. And a lot of organizations don't do that. What you tend to see most companies do, and especially as they start to get into social media, is they take a single piece of content and they basically just spray it out without a lot of thought behind, well, I got to change this for Facebook, or my audience on Facebook is different, or maybe I have two audiences on Facebook. Maybe I have, like you said, the consumer audience and the business audience, or, how people interact with it. A lot of people don't take the time to think through how they're pushing that stuff out. And because of it, it turns, and this is where B2B companies fall down in the beginning, to be honest, one of the ways, I should say, is they tend to do that, and it turns a lot of their followers off because it's just not published in the correct way. Sorry.
So, Mike, very interesting point there, and I think it's something I've certainly been very conscious of, is making sure you understand the audience segments and also how you can engage with them as opposed to how you can simply blast them at a new channel. Let me wrap up with a big question that may, in fact, be a question we lead into one of our first webinars next year. Foursquare.
Yeah.
Where do you see the value of Foursquare?
That's a great question, and it's a loaded question. I hope Dennis Crowley is on the line right now. But it's the value of Foursquare is still trying to be figured out. So I don't think there's any secret that, even though they're growing really fast, and by the way, the data that we pulled in, you might not know this, the largest growing segment of Foursquare users in the world, largest growing region of Foursquare users in the world, believe it or not, is Indonesia. Take that for what you will. But they get a ton of sign-ups every day. Foursquare is still trying to figure out the value of what it is that they're offering. Brands are still trying to figure out the value of what it is that Foursquare is offering. I can tell you that retailers and people with physical locations, so if you're running an agency and you're working with anybody who's in retail, and I don't know how big location-based services are in Australia, but I can tell you that they are absolutely huge here in the States. And retailers have really started to jump on, especially this holiday season. I'll give you an example of one of our customers. I won't tell you who they are, but I'll give you an example. So it's a retail customer that they sell electronics equipment, and they're really popular in malls. So they probably only have 100 stores nationwide, but they're mostly inside malls. And what they came to us and said is, what our software lets them do is facilitate the publishing of tips to different locations. And what's cool about Foursquare is you don't have to own a location to publish tips to it. Does that make sense? So I could publish a tip to really anywhere that I want to, whether or not I'm there, number one, and whether or not I own it, I can still put a tip there. So what the company came to us and said is, look, we get, there's a lot of holiday traffic, it's right before Christmas, people, go to malls. What we want to be able to do is if people come to, put the mall that I'm looking at right outside my window here in Boston, if they go to the Burlington Mall and they check in, we want to be able to send them a note, send them a tip saying, hey, glad to see you at the Burlington Mall doing some holiday shopping. Be sure to come up to the second floor in our store and check out our latest 3D TV that just got released to the market this week. And hopefully the person would take that and go upstairs and see it. When they log into that specific store, they'll say, thanks for checking into this store. Check out the 3D TV demo. If you show this tip to the person behind the register and you show them this code and it serves up a little a point-of-sale code, we'll give you 2 free Blu-ray DVDs if you buy a Blu-ray DVD player on your trip here today. So they've actually started to track social media activity through Foursquare to point-of-sale purchases. So there's a lot of value in that from a brand perspective. I think the question is, how long is this just a kind of a buzz type of thing? Is this just something that's is our location-based services just something that's going to kind of ride the wave and is eventually going to drop off, or is it going to grow into something bigger? So when I think of it, and I think of it in that specific application, I start to think about really cool stuff around loyalty programs and CRM. Could you imagine checking into a Starbucks or your local coffee shop, having that check-in tied into your loyalty program, where all of a sudden the person behind the counter knows that every time I come in I order a large coffee with cream and sugar, and that's served up. I also get loyalty points for the purchase that I made. Everything's tied together and it's tied into that location-based application that I'm using. So it's really CRM, but it's really mobile CRM, and it's social CRM, whatever the buzzword you want to put around it is. But that's where I think that whole market's going. And I think first they need a critical mass, and they aren't there yet, but they're getting closer. And even you see things like Facebook Places and the stuff that they're doing inside Places, and the plans that they have for Places going forward. I think everybody believes there's a market there. It's just where is that market going to go, and how are brands going to use it. And I think that's a critical thing.
Okay. I guess one thing I could see there is, do we have a world where I could potentially walk into, the Sheraton Hotel that I always stay at, and as it checks in, it sends you a message saying, hey, reception's just manically busy. Here's a voucher. Go to the bar and have a beer, and we'll get you when it's quieting down because you're a loyal customer. So.
You had me go to the bar and have a beer, Mark. That was...
Let's not go there, Mike. So many great stories. Mike, just to wrap up, key things you raised today, which I think are really critical for our friends on the webinar. You talked about a content audit. That's just critical, really doing that audit to understand what you've got and then start to map that to where you think you need to be. Put together a content plan, whether it's a blog calendar or just a plan that looks out into the future. I love the idea you said about having a war room where you start to map out where you've got content and where your gaps are. And then start building content, whether you build it yourself, whether you collaborate with your partners, your customers. And then finally you talked about deploy, experiment, grow. That's a really important point, and that's something that I know that we talk to our customers a lot about, which is get in and experiment because it's the best way to learn. So,
no doubt.
So that's key points there, Mike.
And a lot of companies don't do that, Mark. I mean, that's it sounds so simple, and I think we all say it and kind of take it for granted, but getting stuff out there and getting feedback on it is so much better than waiting 3 months to get something developed that may or may not be exactly what you're looking for. So, yeah, I completely agree. I think that's a really important thing that a lot of companies and a lot of individuals tend to overlook.
Excellent. Well, Mike, we've just got a couple of minutes past the hour, so look, I think we might pull off stumps, as we say. Thank you for your time. I know it's getting into your late evening in Boston. I appreciate your time, and for everyone that's on the call, if you want more information about what Awareness are doing, you can see the details there, or feel free to contact me. And we'll be getting into some heavy topics as we go into the new year. I've got some challenges for Mike around some of what we see coming out of the US and how we make that fit into the Australian market. So thanks, Mike. Thank you, everyone, and have a great afternoon wherever you are.